In the farmhouse kitchen, Klaus Hartmann sat at a rough wooden table, his field-gray uniform wrinkled from travel. At 28, his face bore the weathered look of someone who had seen too much, but his eyes still held traces of the idealistic young man who first donned the uniform 2 years ago. A half-eaten breakfast of black bread and ersatz coffee sat before him, growing cold. Across from him, his 55-year-old mother Greta moved about the kitchen with the efficient motions of a farm wife. Her face was lined with worry, her hands rough from years of labor. She glanced frequently at Klaus, as if memorizing his features. "You're too thin," she said, stirring a pot of thin soup. "The army isn't feeding you properly." Klaus forced a smile. "I'm fine, mutter. Better than fine. We're winning the war." The word sounded hollow even to him. Greta stopped stirring and looked at her son with the penetrating gaze only a mother could manage. "Are we? Then why do you jump every time the wind rattles the shutters?" Klaus didn't answer. He stared out the window toward the barn, his hand unconsciously moving to touch a letter in his breast pocket, his orders to return to the Eastern Front in 3 days. "Your father would be proud," Greta continued. "Fighting for the fatherland, just like he did in the Great War." "The Great War killed him, mutter," Klaus said quietly. "Just took 20 years to finish the job." Greta's voice sharpened. "Klaus. You mustn't say such things. If someone heard you," Klaus stood abruptly. "I need to check the barn. Make sure the roof repairs are holding." He headed for the door, leaving Greta staring after him with a mixture of love and fear. Klaus walked across the yard, his military boots crunching on fallen leaves. The morning air carried the scent of smoke from distant chimneys, but underneath it lurked something else, something that made his stomach tighten with unease. As he approached the barn, Klaus noticed fresh scratches around the lock. His hand instinctively moved to the Luger pistol at his hip, a habit ingrained by 2 years of war. The barn door creaked as he opened it, and a shaft of sunlight cut through the darkness within. The barn was filled with the usual farm implements, pitchforks, shovels, coils of rope. Hay bales were stacked against the far wall, and the air was thick with the smell of straw and livestock that hadn't been there for months. Klaus moved cautiously through the space, his soldier's instincts alert. Something was wrong. The hay had been disturbed, and there were what looked like small footprints in the dust. He approached the hay bales, studying the pattern of disturbance. Behind the largest stack, he noticed something that made his blood run cold, a small piece of yellow fabric caught on a nail. Yellow fabric with a star-shaped pattern. "Mein Gott," Klaus whispered. He moved the hay bales aside with trembling hands, revealing a small hollow space behind them. Inside, huddled in a corner, was a young Jewish girl. Rachel Goldstein, 16 years old, stared back at him with eyes that had seen too much. Her dark hair was matted, her face gaunt from hunger, but her gaze was steady and unafraid. She wore a torn yellow dress with a Star of David sewn onto the front, the mark that had made her a target for the machinery of genocide. For a moment, neither of them moved. Klaus's hand hovered over his pistol while Rachel prepared to run, though there was nowhere to go. "Please," Rachel said in accented German. "I'm not here to steal. I just needed somewhere to sleep." Klaus's voice was tight. "How long have you been here?" 3 days. Maybe 4. I lose track." Klaus looked at this girl, this child, and felt his world shift on its axis. Everything he had been taught, everything he had believed about the war, the Jews, the necessity of following orders, crashed against the reality of a frightened teenager hiding in his family's barn. "You escaped from a transport," Klaus said. It wasn't a question. Rachel nodded, not trusting her voice. "They'll come looking for you. The SS, the Gestapo. If they find you here." "I know. I'll leave. I haven't eaten in days, and I was so cold last night." Klaus studied her face, seeing his own younger sister in the hollow of her cheeks, the way she tried to make herself smaller, invisible. "What's your name?" Klaus asked. Rachel hesitated. "Rachel. Rachel Goldstein." "I'm Klaus." Another long moment passed. Klaus should report her immediately. It was his duty as a German soldier, as a loyal citizen of the Reich. The consequences of harboring a Jew were severe, for him, for his mother, for anyone who helped. But looking at Rachel, he saw not the enemy he had been taught to hate, but a terrified child who reminded him of everyone he had ever loved. "Stay here. Don't make any noise. I'll bring you some food." Rachel's eyes widened with surprise and something that might be hope. "Why would you help me?" Klaus didn't have an answer. He turned and left the barn, his mind racing with the implications of what he had just promised. Klaus entered the farmhouse to find Greta preparing lunch. She looked up expectantly, but something in his face made her freeze. "What is it?" "You look like you've seen a ghost," Greta said, worried. "Mother, I need to ask you something, and I need you to trust me," Klaus replied. "Klaus, what's wrong?" "If someone needed help. Someone who was in danger. What would you do?" Greta responded carefully. "What kind of danger?" Klaus struggled with how to explain without revealing too much. His mother was a devout Catholic, raised with the belief that helping others was a sacred duty. But she was also a German citizen living under Nazi rule, where helping the wrong person could mean death. "The kind where doing the right thing could get us both killed," Klaus said. Greta set down her ladle and looked at her son with the full weight of her years and wisdom. "Your father used to say that a man's character isn't measured by what he does when people are watching, but by what he does when no one will ever know. Even if it means defying the Reich?" After a long pause, Greta responded. "Especially then." Klaus nodded, understanding that his mother had just given him permission to risk everything. "I need you to prepare some food. Enough for an extra person. And don't ask questions." "How long will this person be staying?" Greta asked quietly. "I don't know. Maybe not long. Maybe longer." Greta nodded and began gathering food, bread, cheese, some of the precious milk from their last cow. As she worked, Klaus watched her, wondering if he was about to destroy the only family he had left. Later, Klaus approached the barn carrying a small bundle of food and a blanket. The afternoon sun had grown weak, and the air carried the first hint of the harsh winter to come. Inside the barn, he found Rachel exactly where he had left her, as if she was afraid to move, afraid to breathe. "It's not much, but it's what we have," Klaus said, offering the food. Rachel took the food with shaking hands, her eyes never leaving Klaus's face. She bit into the bread with the desperation of someone who didn't know when they would eat again. "Why are you doing this?" Rachel asked between bites. "I don't know. You could be executed for helping me." "I know." "Then why?" Klaus sat on a hay bale across from her, studying this girl who had turned his world upside down. "I have a sister. Had. She was about your age when she died of pneumonia 3 years ago." "I'm sorry," Rachel said. "You look like her. Same dark hair, same way of trying to disappear when you're scared." Rachel stopped eating and looked at him with new understanding. "I'm not your sister." "No. But you're someone's sister. Someone's daughter. And right now, you're here, and you need help. The war has made monsters of men. Why are you different?" Klaus didn't answer immediately. He was thinking of the things he had seen on the Eastern Front, the orders he had followed, the line between civilization and savagery that proved thinner than anyone wanted to believe. "Maybe I'm not different. Maybe I'm just tired of being a monster." That evening, Klaus sat across from his mother at dinner, the weight of secrets heavy between them. Greta had set out their meager meal, potato soup, black bread, and ersatz coffee that tasted like burnt grain. "Mrs. Weber from the village was here today," Greta said. She said there was some excitement yesterday. SS trucks on the main road, searching for something. Klaus's hand tightened on his spoon, but he forced his voice to remain steady. Did she say what they were looking for? Escaped prisoners from a transport. Jews, she said. Can you imagine? Coming through our little village. What did you tell her? Klaus asked carefully. That we'd seen nothing, of course. Though she seemed disappointed. I think she was hoping for some excitement. Klaus met his mother's eyes and saw understanding there. She knew. Maybe not the details, but she knew. I made extra soup today, Greta continued. Thought you might be hungry after your long travels. Thank you, Mutter. There's enough for seconds. Maybe even thirds, if someone was particularly hungry. The message was clear. Klaus nodded, grateful for his mother's wisdom and courage. I think I'll check on the animals before bed. Make sure they're settled for the night. That's a good idea. And Klaus? Take your time. A man should never rush when he's doing important work. Klaus entered the barn carrying a bowl of hot soup and a cup of real coffee, a luxury he had been saving for special occasions. Rachel was awake, huddled under the blanket he had brought earlier. Hot food? Rachel said, surprised. My mother's idea. She knows you're here. Rachel looked alarmed. She knows? But, she won't say anything. She's not like that. How can you be sure? Because she's my mother. And because she's spent the last 3 years watching this war turn neighbors into informants and friends into enemies. She knows what's right. Rachel accepted the soup gratefully, savoring the warmth and the first proper meal she had had in days. What was she like? Your sister? Klaus was surprised by the question. Liesel? She was full of life. Always laughing, always getting into trouble. She wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. I wanted to be a doctor, Rachel said. Wanted? Jews aren't allowed to be doctors anymore. We're not allowed to be anything anymore. Klaus felt a stab of shame at the casual way she stated this fact, as if it was as natural as commenting on the weather. Tell me about your family, Klaus said. Rachel hesitated. Why? Because I need to understand. I need to know who I'm risking everything for. Rachel was quiet for a long moment, then began to speak in a voice barely above a whisper. My father was a violin maker. The finest in Hamburg, people said. He could take a piece of ordinary wood and turn it into something that sang like angels. My mother taught piano lessons to the daughters of wealthy families. Our house was always full of music. She paused, lost in memory. My brother David was 18 when they took him. He was studying to be an engineer. He used to say he would build bridges that would last 1,000 years. The SS came for him during the October raids. We never saw him again. I'm sorry, Klaus said, the words feeling inadequate. My parents, they put me on the last train out of Hamburg. Said they would follow on the next one. But there was no next one. The trains after that didn't go to safety, they went to the camps. Rachel's voice broke slightly, but she continued. I was supposed to go to my uncle in Switzerland. But the train was stopped at the border. The guard separated us, children from adults, men from women. I was put on a different train, one heading east. I jumped when we stopped for water near Nuremberg. I've been walking ever since. Klaus felt something cold settle in his stomach. He had heard whispers about the camps, rumors that the other soldiers dismissed as enemy propaganda. But looking at Rachel, seeing the haunted look in her eyes, he couldn't dismiss anything anymore. How do you know they're not coming back? Klaus asked quietly. Rachel looked at him with the tired wisdom of someone who had aged years in a matter of weeks. Because I've seen the trains, Klaus. I've seen where they go. And no one comes back from there. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling between them like a physical presence. "Why did you help me?" Rachel asked again. "Really? Not because I look like your sister. There has to be more." Klaus considered the question, searching for words to explain something he barely understood himself. 3 months ago, we were ordered to clear a village outside Minsk. The partisan activity there was too dangerous, they said. We were told the villagers were harboring enemies of the Reich. He paused, his hands trembling slightly. There were no partisans there, Rachel. Just farmers and their families. Children playing in the streets. An old woman feeding chickens in her yard. But we had our orders. What did you do? What I was told to do. What a good German soldier does. I followed orders. The admission hung in the air between them like a confession. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about this little girl, maybe 5 years old, with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. She had been playing with a wooden doll when we arrived. After it was over, I found the doll in the mud. Someone had stitched a tiny dress for it out of yellow fabric. Rachel's eyes widened slightly at the detail. I've carried that doll with me ever since. In my pack, wrapped in oilcloth. I don't know why. Maybe to remind myself that there are lines you can't uncross, choices you can't unmake. Klaus met her eyes. When I saw you in here, hiding and frightened, I thought of that little girl. I thought of my sister. I thought of all the people I've failed to save. And I decided that maybe, just maybe, I could save one. Rachel was quiet for a long time, processing his words. You think helping me will make up for what you've done? No, Klaus said immediately. Nothing can make up for that. But maybe it's a start. The next morning brought unwelcome visitors. Klaus was chopping wood behind the farmhouse when he heard the sound of engines approaching. He set down his axe and walked to the front of the house, where he saw 2 black Mercedes cars pulling into the yard. His blood ran cold as he recognized the uniforms of the men stepping out, SS officers, their death's head insignia gleaming in the morning sun. The lead officer was tall and thin, with pale eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail of the farmhouse and its surroundings. He approached Klaus with the measured stride of a man accustomed to being feared. Oberstfreiter Hartmann, the officer said, reading from a clipboard. I am Sturmbannführer Richter. We're conducting a security sweep of the area. Klaus snapped to attention, his military training taking over. Herr Sturmbannführer. How may I assist you? There have been reports of escaped prisoners in this region. Jews who fled during a transport mishap 3 days ago. We have reason to believe they may be hiding in the countryside. Klaus felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. I haven't seen anyone suspicious, sir. Just my mother and myself. Richter's pale eyes fixed on Klaus with unsettling intensity. Of course. But you understand we must conduct a thorough search. Orders from Berlin. Naturally, sir. Richter gestured to his men, who began moving toward the outbuildings. Klaus watched helplessly as they approached the barn, his heart pounding so loudly he was sure they could hear it. Tell me, Oberstfreiter, Richter said conversationally, what brings you home during such a crucial time in the war? Medical leave, sir. Wounded in action near Stalingrad. Ah yes, I see that in your file. Shrapnel to the shoulder. Quite heroic. There was something in Richter's tone that made Klaus uneasy, as if the officer was testing him somehow. Just doing my duty, sir. Indeed. And what is your opinion of the Jewish question, Oberstfreiter? The question hit Klaus like a physical blow. He could feel Richter watching him, studying his reaction. I believe in following orders, sir. The Reich knows what's best for Germany. A diplomatic answer. But I'm curious about your personal feelings. Have you had much contact with Jews? Klaus's mind raced. Was this a trap? Did Richter already know about Rachel? He forced himself to remain calm. No more than any soldier, sir. I've encountered Jewish partisans in the East, of course. Dangerous enemies of the Reich. Dangerous, yes. But also cunning. They have a talent for survival, for hiding in places you wouldn't expect. Like frightened animals. At that moment, one of the SS men emerged from the barn, shaking his head. Nothing here, Herr Sturmbannführer. Just farm equipment and hay. Klaus felt a surge of relief so strong it nearly buckled his knees. Rachel must have found a better hiding place, or perhaps, search again, Richter ordered. More thoroughly this time. Check every bale, every corner. Jews are skilled at making themselves invisible. The officer returned to the barn with obvious reluctance. Klaus watched, his mouth dry as sand, as the man began pulling apart the hay bales more systematically. Any moment now, he would find Rachel's hiding place. Any moment now, Klaus's world would come crashing down. But minutes passed, and still nothing. The SS man emerged again, this time looking frustrated. I'm sorry, Herr Sturmbannführer. There's nothing there. I've checked every possible hiding place. Richter's expression darkened. Impossible. Our information indicated this area specifically. Perhaps they've moved on, sir. Klaus suggested, trying to keep his voice steady. Richter stared at him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Perhaps. But we'll be back, Oberstfreiter. If you see anything suspicious, anything at all, you will report it immediately. Of course, sir. The SS men climbed back into their cars and drove away, leaving Klaus standing in the yard with his hands shaking. He waited until the sound of their engines had faded completely before rushing to the barn. Inside, he found no trace of Rachel. The hay bales were scattered across the floor where the SS man had searched, but there was no sign of the girl who had been hiding there just hours before. Rachel, he called softly. They're gone. It's safe. No response. Klaus began to panic. Had they found her after all? Had she run away during the night, deciding that staying was too dangerous? Then he heard a faint sound from above, a soft scraping, like someone moving carefully across wooden boards. He looked up and saw a section of the barn's loft floor that didn't quite match the rest. With growing excitement, he climbed the ladder to the hayloft. Rachel? A board shifted, and Rachel's face appeared in the gap. She looked pale and frightened, but alive. I heard the cars coming, she whispered. I remembered seeing this loose board yesterday. I thought if I could hide up here. Klaus helped her down from the cramped space between the loft floor and the roof. She was covered in dust and splinters, but unharmed. That was brilliant, Klaus said. They searched everywhere but never thought to look up there. I've gotten good at hiding, Rachel said quietly. It's the only skill that matters anymore. They stood in the scattered hay, both of them trembling with the aftermath of fear. Klaus realized that everything had changed. The SS knew to look for escaped Jews in this area. They would be back, and next time they might be more thorough. We can't stay here, Klaus said. It's too dangerous now. I know. I'll leave tonight. Head south toward the mountains. You'll die out there. Winter's coming, and you don't know the country. Then what do you suggest? Klaus was quiet for a moment, thinking. An idea was forming in his mind, dangerous and probably foolish, but perhaps their only chance. I know someone who might help. A priest in the village. Father Mueller. He's not like the others. He's helped people before. You're sure you can trust him? I'm not sure of anything anymore. But I know I can't let you face this alone. That evening, Klaus told his mother about his plan. She listened in silence as he explained about Father Mueller, about the network of people who had been quietly helping Jews escape the Reich. It's dangerous, Klaus, Greta said when he finished. If you're caught. I know. But I can't just let her die. Not when I have the power to help. Greta nodded slowly. Your father would be proud of you. Not for the uniform or the medals, but for this. For choosing to be human when it would be easier to be a monster. Will you help us? Of course. She's just a child, Klaus. How could I not? They spent the next hour planning. Klaus would take Rachel to the village church under cover of darkness. Father Müller held evening services that often ran late, providing cover for their arrival. If the priest agreed to help, he would contact the network of safe houses that stretched from Bavaria to the Swiss border. As night fell, Klaus and Rachel prepared to leave. Greta had provided Rachel with some of her own clothes, a simple brown dress and a worn coat that would help her blend in with the local population. She had also packed a small bag with food and what little money they could spare. Thank you, Rachel said to Greta. For everything. I know what you're risking. We all have to live with our choices, child. I choose to help you live with yours. Klaus and Rachel left the farmhouse as the church bells were ringing 9 o'clock. They moved through the darkness like ghosts, avoiding the main roads and staying close to the tree line. The village was only 3 kilometers away, but the journey felt endless. As they walked, Rachel spoke about her life before the war, about music lessons and family dinners, about dreams of studying medicine and helping people. Klaus listened, trying to imagine a world where such dreams were possible for everyone. What will you do after the war? Rachel asked. I don't know. Go home, I suppose. Try to rebuild. Do you think we'll win? The Allies, I mean. Klaus was quiet for a moment. I think the war is already over. We just haven't admitted it yet. Then why keep fighting? Because that's what soldiers do. We follow orders until someone tells us to stop. Even when those orders are wrong? Klaus didn't answer immediately. The question went to the heart of everything he had been struggling with, the conflict between duty and conscience, between loyalty and humanity. I used to think that following orders was enough. That if I just did what I was told, I could avoid having to make hard choices. But I've learned that not choosing is still a choice. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is to disobey. They reached the village as the last light faded from the sky. The church stood at the center of the small town, its spire reaching toward the stars. Light flickered in the windows, and they could hear the sound of singing from within, a hymn Klaus remembered from his childhood. Are you ready? Klaus asked. Rachel nodded, pulling the coat tighter around her shoulders. Together, they walked toward the church, toward an uncertain future, but also toward hope. Inside the church, Father Müller was conducting evening prayers with a small congregation of elderly villagers. He was a man in his 60s, with kind eyes and hands that bore the calluses of someone who had worked with tools before taking holy orders. When he saw Klaus and Rachel slip in through the back door, he showed no surprise, as if he had been expecting them. After the service ended and the other parishioners had departed, Father Müller approached them. Klaus, he said warmly. It's been too long since you've been to service. Father, I need to speak with you. Privately. The priest nodded and led them to a small office behind the altar. Once the door was closed, Klaus explained the situation as quickly and quietly as possible. Father Müller listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each word. I see, he said when Klaus finished. And you're asking me to help her reach safety? I'm asking you to save her life. Father Müller looked at Rachel, who had remained silent throughout the conversation. Child, do you understand the danger you're in? Not just from the SS, but from the journey ahead? I understand, Rachel said quietly. But I also understand that staying here means certain death. At least this way, I have a chance. The priest nodded slowly. There are people who can help you. It won't be easy, and there are no guarantees. But there is a path to safety, if you're willing to take it. I am. Then we'll need to move quickly. The SS have been more active recently, and our network is under increased scrutiny. Klaus, are you prepared to be part of this? Klaus didn't hesitate. Yes. Then here's what we'll do. There's a farmhouse 20 kilometers south of here, owned by a family named Brenner. They're sympathetic to our cause. I'll send word tonight that you're coming. You'll need to travel during the day, but separately. Klaus, you'll take the main road on foot, as if you're simply walking to the next village. Rachel, you'll travel through the forest, parallel to the road. If there's trouble, Klaus can provide a distraction. What happens at the Brenner farm? Rachel asked. They'll hide you for a few days while we arrange the next stage of your journey. From there, you'll be passed to another family, then another, until you reach the Swiss border. Klaus felt a mixture of relief and terror. The plan was dangerous, but it was also their best hope. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. First light. The longer you stay here, the greater the risk to everyone. They spent the night in the church, sleeping on pews with blankets Father Müller provided. Klaus found himself unable to sleep, staring at the stained glass windows and thinking about the path they were about to take. Tomorrow, he would officially become a traitor to the Reich. There would be no going back. But looking at Rachel, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, Klaus knew he was making the right choice. Whatever happened next, he would face it with a clear conscience. Dawn came too soon. Father Müller woke them with bread and coffee, and blessed them both before they left. As they walked out of the church, Klaus felt as if he was stepping into a new world, one where the old rules no longer applied, where courage mattered more than orders. The journey to the Brenner farm took most of the day. Klaus walked along the main road, trying to look like a soldier on leave visiting friends. Several times, he encountered other travelers, farmers heading to market, soldiers on patrol, civilians going about their daily business. Each encounter made his heart race, but no one questioned his presence. Meanwhile, Rachel made her way through the forest, following paths that Klaus had sketched out for her the night before. They had arranged to meet at specific points along the route, brief encounters that would confirm they were both safe and on course. As the afternoon wore on, Klaus began to feel more confident. Perhaps this would work after all. Perhaps they could actually get Rachel to safety without anyone discovering their plan. But as they approached the final stretch of road to the Brenner farm, Klaus saw something that made his blood run cold. A roadblock ahead, manned by SS soldiers who were checking papers and searching vehicles. There was no way around it, the road was the only approach to the farm. Klaus melted back into the trees and found Rachel waiting at their final rendezvous point. There's a problem, he said, explaining about the roadblock. Can we go around? Not without adding hours to the journey. And if we're late, the Brenners might think we're not coming. Rachel was quiet for a moment, then looked at Klaus with determination. I'll surrender myself. Walk right up to the roadblock and turn myself in. While they're focused on me, you can slip past and warn the Brenners. Absolutely not. Klaus, it's the only way. You said yourself that the network is more important than any one person. If the Brenners are compromised because of me, I won't let you sacrifice yourself. Then what do you suggest? Klaus thought frantically, then had an idea. It was risky, but it might work. I still have my uniform. My papers. If I approach the roadblock as a German soldier, they'll be less suspicious. And if I can convince them I'm conducting my own search. You want to walk right up to the SS and pretend to be hunting for me? It's crazy enough that it might work. SS officers expect other German soldiers to cooperate with their operations. If I act like I'm part of the search, they might let me pass. Rachel looked doubtful. And if they don't? Then we'll both be caught. But it's better than certain death. They spent the next hour refining the plan. Klaus would approach the roadblock openly, claiming to be conducting a sweep of the area for escaped prisoners. While he distracted the SS officers, Rachel would circle around through the forest and approach the Brenner farm from the east. As evening approached, Klaus changed into his Wehrmacht uniform and walked boldly toward the roadblock. His heart was pounding, but he forced himself to project confidence and authority. Heil Hitler, he called out as he approached the SS checkpoint. The soldiers returned his greeting and snapped to attention. The officer in charge, a young Untersturmführer, looked pleased to see him. Oberstfreiter Hartmann, Wehrmacht. I'm conducting a security sweep of this area on orders from Divisional Command. Excellent, the SS officer replied. We've been here all day but haven't seen anything suspicious. Are you looking for the escaped Jews as well? Among other things. Have you searched the Brenner farm? Not yet. We were planning to check it before we withdraw for the evening. Klaus's mind raced. If the SS searched the farm just as Rachel was arriving, the entire network could be exposed. I'll handle that, Klaus said. My orders are to conduct a thorough search of all buildings in this sector. You men can focus on the road traffic. The SS officer looked uncertain. I should probably accompany you. Protocol, you understand. Of course. But I should mention that Divisional Command specifically requested Wehrmacht handling of this operation. Something about maintaining good relations with the local population. It was a complete fabrication, but Klaus delivered it with enough authority that the young officer nodded reluctantly. Very well. But if you find anything, you'll be the first to know. Klaus left the roadblock and headed toward the Brenner farm, hoping that Rachel had managed to get there ahead of him. The farmhouse sat in a small valley, surrounded by fields and orchards. Smoke rose from the chimney, and chickens pecked in the yard, a scene of peaceful domesticity that belied the danger lurking just kilometers away. Klaus approached the front door and knocked. A middle-aged woman answered, her face creased with worry. Mrs. Brenner? I'm Klaus Hartmann. Father Müller sent me. The woman's expression didn't change, but she stepped aside to let him enter. Inside, Klaus found Rachel sitting at a kitchen table, looking exhausted but relieved. Thank God, she said when she saw him. I was beginning to think something had happened. We're not safe yet, Klaus said. There's an SS roadblock just down the road. They're planning to search this farm. Mrs. Brenner's face went pale. When? Soon. Maybe within the hour. Then we need to move quickly. Hans, she called to her husband, who appeared from another room. The SS are coming. We need to get the girl to the cellar. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. The Brenners had prepared for this possibility, constructing a hidden compartment in their cellar that could conceal a person for hours if necessary. Rachel was bundled into the space with blankets and water, while Klaus and the Brenners worked to eliminate any trace of her presence. Just as they finished, Klaus heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Through the window, he saw the SS roadblock team driving toward the farm. I'll handle this, Klaus said. Remember, you've never seen me before tonight. I'm just a Wehrmacht soldier conducting a routine search. Mrs. Brenner nodded, her hands shaking as she smoothed her apron. Her husband took his position by the fireplace, trying to look like a farmer settling in for the evening. Klaus opened the door just as the SS officers were getting out of their vehicle. He stepped outside to meet them, projecting an air of professional competence. Gentlemen, he said. I've just finished my search of the premises. No sign of the fugitives. The young Untersturmführer looked disappointed. Nothing at all? The family has been cooperative. They're loyal Germans, by all appearances. But I found these in the barn. Klaus produced a few items he had placed there earlier, a scrap of fabric, some bread crumbs, signs that someone might have sheltered there briefly. Someone was definitely here, Klaus continued. But they've moved on. probably heading south toward the mountains. The SS officer examined the evidence with growing excitement. Excellent work, Oberstfreiter. How long ago do you think they left? No more than a day or two. If you deploy your men to the southern approaches, you might be able to intercept them. Brilliant. We'll set up checkpoints on all the mountain roads. As the SS team prepared to leave, Klaus felt a surge of satisfaction. He had not only protected Rachel and the Brenners, but had also sent the Nazi hunters off in the wrong direction. But his satisfaction was short-lived. As the vehicles were pulling away, the young officer leaned out of his window. Oberstfreiter. I almost forgot. Sturmbannführer Richter wants to see you back at headquarters. Something about your report on the security situation. Klaus's blood ran cold. Richter, the SS officer who had searched his farm just days before. The man who had looked at him with such suspicious intensity. When? Klaus asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Tonight. He's waiting for you now. Klaus nodded and watched the SS vehicles disappear into the darkness. When he returned to the farmhouse, the Brenners were already bringing Rachel up from the cellar. What's wrong? Rachel asked, seeing his expression. I have to go back. There's an SS officer who wants to question me. It's a trap, Mrs. Brenner said immediately. They know something. Maybe. But if I don't go, they'll come looking for me. And that puts all of you in danger. Rachel grabbed his arm. Klaus, you can't. If they arrest you, then you'll continue without me. The Brenners will get you to the next safe house, and from there to the border. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for me. You don't have a choice. This is my decision. Klaus turned to the Brenners. How long before the next contact? 3 days, Hans Brenner replied. There's a baker in Rosenheim who's part of the network. He'll take her from there. Good. Keep her safe until then. Klaus embraced Rachel briefly, feeling the weight of everything unsaid between them. Promise me something, he said. What? When you get to America, become a doctor. Help people. Make all of this mean something. Rachel was crying now, tears streaming down her face. I promise. Klaus left the farmhouse and began the long walk back to the village. With each step, he felt more certain that he was walking toward his death. But he also felt something else, a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. For the first time since the war began, he was choosing his own path. The SS headquarters was located in the village's former schoolhouse, a building that had once echoed with children's laughter but now served as a center of fear and oppression. Klaus presented himself to the guard at the front door. Oberstfreiter Hartmann reporting as ordered. The guard escorted him to a small office where Sturmbannführer Richter was waiting. The SS officer was studying a file, and when he looked up, Klaus saw something predatory in his pale eyes. Sit down, Oberstfreiter. Klaus took the chair across from Richter's desk, his hands resting calmly on his knees. Whatever happened next, he would face it with dignity. I've been reviewing your service record, Richter said. Quite impressive. 2 years on the Eastern Front, wounded in action, decorated for bravery. A model German soldier. Thank you, sir. And yet, there are some inconsistencies in your recent activities that concern me. Klaus said nothing, waiting for the trap to be sprung. For example, Richter continued, you conducted a search of the Brenner farm this evening. A search that turned up evidence of Jewish fugitives. And yet, when my men searched the same location just hours later, they found nothing. I reported what I found, sir. If the evidence was disturbed afterward. Yes, about that evidence. Very convenient, don't you think? Just enough to confirm that fugitives had been there, but not enough to actually capture them. Klaus felt sweat beading on his forehead, but he kept his voice steady. I don't understand what you're suggesting, sir. Richter leaned forward, his eyes boring into Klaus's. "I'm suggesting that you're not who you appear to be, Oberschreiter. I'm suggesting that you're a traitor to the Reich." The accusation hung in the air between them. Klaus knew that his next words would determine not only his own fate, but possibly the fate of Rachel and everyone who had helped her. "That's a serious charge, sir. Do you have evidence to support it?" "I have instincts. And my instincts tell me that you're lying." "Your instincts are wrong." Richter smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see about that." "Guard." 2 SS soldiers entered the room, and Klaus knew his time was up. But as they moved to arrest him, he felt no fear, only a strange sense of completion. "Klaus Hartmann," Richter said formally, "you are under arrest for treason against the German Reich. You will be held pending investigation and trial." As they led him away, Klaus thought about Rachel, hopefully safe in the Brenner's cellar. He thought about his mother, who would wonder why he didn't come home. He thought about all the choices that had led him to this moment, some good, some terrible, all irreversible. But mostly, he thought about a little girl with pigtails who had played with a wooden doll in the mud of a Russian village. He had failed to save her, but perhaps he had saved someone else. Perhaps that was enough. The cell they put him in was small and cold, with a single barred window that looked out onto the village square. Klaus sat on the narrow cot and waited for whatever came next. He had no illusions about his fate. Traitors to the Reich were shot, usually after prolonged interrogation designed to extract the names of co-conspirators. But Klaus had made his peace with death. What worried him more was the possibility that his arrest would compromise the network that was helping Rachel. If Richter's suspicions extended beyond Klaus himself, other lives would be at risk. As the night wore on, Klaus found himself thinking about the war and what it had done to his country, to his people, to himself. He had worn the uniform of the Wehrmacht for 2 years, had followed orders without question, had become complicit in atrocities that would haunt him forever. But in the end, he had chosen to be human rather than a machine of war. It was a small redemption, but perhaps it was enough. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Klaus was awakened by the sound of explosions in the distance, American bombers attacking military targets to the south. But more importantly, he heard the guards talking about Allied advances on the Western Front. The war was turning, and everyone knew it. That afternoon, Richter came to his cell personally. "The situation has changed, Oberschreiter," he said. "We're being transferred to Berlin for enhanced interrogation. I trust you'll use the journey to reconsider your position." Klaus said nothing. He had nothing left to say to men like Richter. But as they were loading him into a transport vehicle, Klaus heard something that made his heart leap with hope. One of the guards was complaining about a failed operation. SS units had spent the entire night searching the mountain roads for Jewish fugitives and had found nothing. It meant Rachel was safe. The network was still intact. His sacrifice had not been in vain. The transport convoy never reached Berlin. 3 hours into the journey, it was attacked by Allied fighter planes. In the confusion that followed, Klaus managed to escape, though he was wounded in the process, a piece of shrapnel in his leg that would leave him with a permanent limp. He made his way back to the Brenner farm, hoping to find news of Rachel. What he found instead was an empty house and signs of hasty departure. The Brenners had fled, probably taking Rachel with them to the next safe house in the network. Klaus knew he couldn't stay in the area, the SS would be looking for him, and his presence would endanger anyone who helped him. So he began his own journey, traveling at night and hiding during the day, making his way toward the Swiss border. It took him 3 weeks to reach the crossing point, traveling through forests and over mountain passes, sustained by the kindness of strangers who recognized him as a fugitive and chose to help rather than betray him. Each act of assistance restored a little of his faith in humanity. At the border, Klaus encountered a group of refugees who had been waiting days for their chance to cross. Among them, to his amazement and joy, was Rachel. She had made it safely through the network, just as they had planned. "Klaus," she cried when she saw him. I thought you were dead. So did I, he replied, embracing her. But apparently God isn't finished with me yet. They crossed into Switzerland together on a moonless night in November 1943, guided by smugglers who had made the journey countless times before. As they walked through the mountain passes, Klaus felt as if he was leaving behind not just Nazi Germany, but his entire past as a soldier of the Reich. In Switzerland, they were processed by Allied authorities and eventually given passage to America. Rachel settled in New York, where she worked as a nurse while studying to become a doctor, fulfilling the promise she had made to Klaus in the barn. Klaus himself found work as a translator for the Allied forces, using his knowledge of German military procedures to help prosecute war criminals. They remained friends for the rest of their lives, bound together by the shared experience of choosing humanity over hatred, courage over convenience. Every year on the anniversary of their escape, they would meet for dinner and remember the people who had helped them, Father Müller, the Brenners, Greta, and all the others who had risked everything to save a Jewish girl and redeem a German soldier. Klaus never returned to Germany. The country of his birth had been forever tainted by the choices its people had made, the orders they had followed, the atrocities they had committed or allowed. But he had found a new home in America, a place where he could build a life free from the shadows of the past. In 1961, Klaus received a letter from his mother, the first contact he had had with his family since the war ended. She wrote that she had spent the years since 1945 wondering what had happened to him, praying that he had survived the chaos of the war's end. She had never remarried, never left the farm, but had spent her days tending to a small garden and caring for refugees who occasionally found their way to her door. Klaus wrote back, telling her about his life in America, about Rachel and her successful medical practice, about the peace he had found in helping others heal from the traumas of war. He also told her about the dreams that still haunted him, dreams of a little girl with pigtails, of trains heading east, of all the people he had failed to save. Greta wrote back with news that brought tears to Klaus's eyes. She had spent the years since the war caring for children orphaned by the conflict, turning the farmhouse into an unofficial orphanage. She had never asked for recognition or compensation, simply doing what she felt was right. I learned from you, she wrote, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is save one person. And sometimes, saving one person saves part of your own soul. Klaus visited her once, in 1965, when she was dying of cancer. They sat in the kitchen where he had first made the decision to help Rachel, and talked about the choices that had shaped their lives. Do you regret it? Greta asked. Everything you gave up? Klaus thought about the question seriously. He had given up his country, his identity as a German, his military career. He had lived with the constant weight of guilt over the things he had done in the war before meeting Rachel. But he had also gained something precious, the knowledge that he had chosen to be human when it mattered most.